joining us live, and certain parts of this conference are being recorded, the ones where we've had the permission from the speakers, and that will be archived as all of our conferences are. So, it's time to do the review of a very difficult year for the industry. Now, in 2017, I posed the question at this conference in Munich, are we looking in the right place for growth? And I'm thinking here very much of Europe, but of course, the same question could be asked internationally. So let's have a look at the achievements of the industry, the consumer healthcare market, as we now call ourselves. We are less and less an OTC industry and more consumer healthcare. Let's look at what's happened in the year 2018, expectations for 2019. So let's look at the macro. Now, normally we don't look at the macro. I just go straight in and say the market grew by 4.5%, and here's the volume, and here's the country. But I want to go back and do some of the more fundamental building blocks of the industry. So let's start with population. And here we are talking global. Does anyone have a figure? By how much did the world population grow in 2018? Any suggestions?
150 million.
Can I have it in percentages? I only do small numbers.
1.8.
1.8. Yep, Giacomo. 4. Maybe in Brazil. It's 1.1. And what do you think the global rate of inflation was? If only, it was 3%. So if you add those two figures together, we get a benchmark. So if we say quite crudely, there are 1.1% more people, prices of all products are up by 3%. This data is from reliable sources, either the World Bank or the United Nations. The International Monetary Fund tells us that last year, the world economy grew by 3.5%. So if you take that against a benchmark of 4.6, in very simplistic terms, I'm sure all economists in the room are saying you don't do it like this, but in very simplistic terms, the global economy has underperformed what it should have achieved by about 1%. Let's have a look at OTC. Now, normally OTC is ahead of those benchmarks. Not last year, 4%. So we would have expected to grow by 4.6% globally to keep up with those benchmarks. In other words, to say there are more consumers, they're paying higher prices in general. Why didn't we achieve 4.6%? Because the curious thing is that we had volume increase. So obviously there are price pressures in the market. And we'll look a bit more at that in a moment. So here's the data set. And I think we have to say that for 2018, at least in the conventional way of looking at the market, it underperformed. So here's the data set, 5 years, and the average, compound annual growth rate average for those 5 years is 4.5%, but a slowing down last year and the year before. And in fact, the year before that, because the compound average growth rate, annual growth rate, really stands at 4.5% because of the outstandingly good year in 2015. We had lots of coughs and colds, we had some new switches, and we had pretty good growth in the emerging markets. And they're the three main drivers of the industry as we define it. And as we'll see in a moment, we have not had those drivers in recent years. Going forward, the latest estimate is the same growth rate, about 4.5%. We're just finishing our forecast, so don't be surprised if in 2 weeks you might see a number fractionally below or fractionally above. But the top line reading that I've seen from our data team is that the 5-year growth rate going forward is going to be about 4.5%. So why is the market underperforming? Now, all of you will know this great British movie made for about $5 and netting about $250 million around the world, 4 weddings and a funeral. I would describe the OTC industry last year as 5 funerals and a wedding, because there were a lot of things that went wrong. So first of all, price depression. Now, we track it in very simple terms. We track the number of units by the value, divide one into the other, and although there may have been shifts within, it looks as though the average prices paid were down. And that would be for competitive reasons. That would be because retailers are driving prices down or not allowing price increases, the growth of generics, the growth of private label. Very complex to understand the simple statement that there's been price pressure in the industry. And we know that in the 2 winter periods, the end of which came into, of the last cough-cold season, which came into the early part of 2018, and the present winter season, which is just ending, didn't produce as many coughs and colds as in historical years. And amazingly, and I saw a presentation at the US OTC Association a week or so ago, 2018 was the first year in which there were no switches at all in the United States. And the IRI data, which had shown historically that switch had produced 10% in one year or 15% in another year, it was 0. And that is a worry. And I had the great fortune to moderate a leadership panel which had the presidents of Bayer and the president of Sanofi, the president of Taisho, and a very, very senior person of J&J. And I asked the question, are we giving up on switch? And the answer is no. Switch is an important driver of the future of healthcare. But at the moment, we're not doing very many. There are lots in process. I'll talk about 1 or 2 of those a little later on, and many planned, I'm sure, but in terms of coming to market in 2018, we didn't have one. So that was our third funeral, and the deceleration of the emerging markets. They still have high growth, but not as high in the past. There was one year, not so many years ago, when Russia produced 25% value growth. Last year, it was at the level of 0. We see Brazil, Henry, your market, which in the past has also shown amazing growth, 18%, 20%. Now we're getting low single digits. China, which is off the top. India doing well, but not yet at the double-digit level. And then the impact of e-commerce on retail. That's been a big holding back of the consumer healthcare market, except it's not. It's only a case of how you look at the market. Because if you look more totally at the market, if you look very comprehensively, that's our wedding, because it's a fantastic win for the industry, and we'll see the numbers in a moment. E-pharmacy, e-commerce has spectacular growth. Now, at the moment, it's not generally coming from the major manufacturers in the retail sector. It's coming from entrepreneurs. We're particularly concerned about Amazon's range of private label products, which are making major share gains in vitamins, minerals, and supplements, and in certain hygiene categories. So let's take a look at that. Let's look at the whole market. And for the first year, we actually have some data to support this, whereas in the previous 2 years, we've talked about, we think that if you add e-commerce, and we think if you add the Avon, Amway, multi-level business into the total, it's much bigger than we think. And in fact, we now have some data to prove it. So if we look at the total market, which consists of the retail category, still the biggest part of it, direct sales or multi-level, that's Avon, Amway, and the like, and then e-commerce, which we're calling internet and mail order, because there is still a mail order component to this market, and it may be linked to internet and it may not be linked to internet. And when you bring that bigger definition in, then we definitely meet the benchmark. Remember, benchmark is 4.6%, because that's the addition of inflation and population growth. So at that point, we're looking at numbers that are much more in line. All channels, 5-year compound annual growth rate, 5.3%. It doesn't sound much, but it is the right side of the benchmark. And then when you look at some of the detail, it's extremely interesting. So the all channels estimate for 2019, of course, we're only 3 months into it, so it is an estimate, it's 5.2, and for the 5 years ahead, 5.4. But it's the detail that's interesting. The retail market, as I've said, is expected to grow at about 4.5%. And again, we're still talking global. The direct market, the Avon, Amway market, that's actually not growing so well. The growth rate has declined, and going forward, we think it will be only 3.5%. But the spectacular growth is e-pharmacy, e-commerce, or as we're calling it here, internet and mail order. We're estimating 20% annual growth rate. And if I'm honest, I think that's an extremely conservative estimate. And in future years, I hope we'll be coming here and saying it grew at 35% or even 50%. Let's have a look at that category in a little more detail. Here it is, we'll put some numbers to it. So here's the total market. And in 2018, the total market in euros, factory prices, or as close as we can get to it, 152 billion. The retail market was 118, we've seen that number. Direct, 21, 13 billion for e-commerce. So we're at the start of this journey. But the growth rate historically has been 20%. And this year we think it will grow 15%, and beyond that, I'm sorry, I gave you the wrong figure. The compound is 20% in the past. In the future it's 13%, but again, I think that's extremely cautious. Now, what about Europe? I have all that data, of course, for Europe. I'm not showing it here because we have limited time, but if anyone has an interest, many of you are subscribers to our DB6 database, we'll have that anyway, and for those who aren't, please ask, and we'll certainly cut that data for you. So what about Europe? Well, the first thing is that compared with the international markets, Europe is still underperforming. So red are the classic emerging markets, and Turkey is the fastest growing market. My good colleague Tulay İzbul is here from Turkey, our network partner. Of course, what we have is a lot of very generous price increases from the government. I tend not to make political statements, but I think it would be fair to say that the President Erdogan does feel somewhat embattled and therefore is doing things to please the community. So you have reimbursement of OTCs in the main and pretty generous price increases. We've taken Venezuela out of figures altogether, by the way, because the inflation rate now running at several million% a year means it's impossible to keep up with the numbers. And then you see the other well-performing countries, Brazil, India, South Africa and the like, but all growing less than they were in the past. And then you look at the green markets, which is international but not developed markets but not Europe, and you see that we don't have particularly high growth in Canada, US, and Australia, and Japan is always flatlining. The yellow markets are Europe, and the major markets that we show here, still very good growth from Poland, despite the concern of changes in pharmacy ownership and some other limiting factors from the present government. But Poland continues to do well, the best of the European markets. Spain did well, as you can read here. Italy and UK in the range of 2%. Similarly, Russia down, lowest we've seen it for some years. Germany positive. France negative. We have our data partners from both Germany and France here, from Insight Health and Open Health, and thank you very much for your cooperation. It is truly much appreciated. And Switzerland looking very weak this year. So Russia is no longer the driver of Europe. So if we look at a historical data set for 3 years, this is with Russia, its value. So in 2016, Europe grew by 4.5%, and everyone was very pleased with that. That's come down now because, as you'll see when we extract Russia, Russia used to make a significant contribution in the past, but now it flatlines. So we don't get the boost from Russia that we used to have. But volume is negative, and that is a real worry. Let me go back, I missed that point. So volume is slightly negative, and that is a worry, because we know that we have falling prices. We have negative, by a very small amount, volume. That's a real worry. Here I'm talking just retail, by the way. This is the retail sector, not including the other two all channels. So when we look at of course, a country might have a very small percentage growth, but because of its scale, contribute a significant number of euros. So the European market, region Europe, including Russia, Ukraine, and the like, produced over this 5-year period, which is really 4, because the 5 years ago is the base year, 4 years on top of that, produced just over 4 billion euros of extra sales. And Russia, if you compare how it was 5 years ago to today, despite the dip, has produced one of those 4 billion. Poland, Italy, Germany, you read them. Romania is pulled out because one of my few plugs is to say that we will be in Romania for a one-day conference later this year, being organized by my very good friend Luca. We were in Greece last year and we had 110 people, so we're carrying on with this spirit of regional conferences, and it's good to know that Romania is a growth market to host us for our conference, which is later this year, September, I believe. In terms of where Europe contributes to the global scale, then Russia, Poland, Italy, and Germany are amongst the major contributors on a global scale, but the two biggest contributors worldwide are China, because of its 6% growth on a big market, and even the US at 2.5%, because it's the biggest world OTC market for maybe 2 or 3 years more, still produces 3.5 billion of additional sales, to give us a total of 19 billion euros. And I must remind myself that this is a euro presentation. I normally present in dollars, but this is a euro presentation, so 19 billion extra dollars. The enhanced GSK will have just under 7% of the market in Europe. And that's what's astonishing, that despite these very, very substantial mergers and acquisitions, the market is still very fragmented, the top 6 taking a 26% market share. And the major manufacturers still, in an organic sense, underperforming the total market. So where we look for growth, and those of you who've been at the presentations know that we take the top 100 of the companies in DB6, we put them in descending order of growth, and we show the top. In fact, this year, we're showing more than usual. Normally we show 10. We're showing about 20, because 20 companies globally, of the ones that have scale, have more than 10% growth, so are into double digits. Now, many of them are in China, but it isn't so easy these days in China, in a market that's growing by under 7%, to produce 20 and 30% growth. But I'm singling out two companies on this chart that are Western companies, or partly owned Western companies, that have done particularly well. First is the Chinese company Health and Happiness, which has taken over the Swiss wellness company of Australia. And that total business, which has not only the Swiss brands, but a number of probiotics as well, and infant nutrition and the like, grew by 22%. And there's the Swiss brand, Australia's #1 multivitamin. At the bottom is Santen. Santen growing at 15% a year with brands like Norm. And as I described last year when I showed some of the growth brands in Europe, well, one of them is Teolose, from the Teo company, growing because the marketing is directed to the optician and the ophthalmologist, promoting the fact that the brand, the eye drops, are preservative-free, and then the consumer goes and buys at the pharmacy. So with very little direct-to-consumer marketing, companies like Teo and Santen of Japan, which is in a number of countries, are getting very high growth. When we look at the second chart, we see again a lot of companies that we're not too familiar with, although we do see more Western companies on this second list. But I'll draw your attention to Eye Health, which is the marketer of Culturelle, which over the last 5 years has been growing at 12% by Blue Ocean strategy, sticking to what it knows. But I think it's interesting that insofar as we can describe it as a multinational, Abbott is the company with the highest growth in consumer healthcare. It's interesting because we don't think automatically of Abbott, great company, but we don't think of Abbott as the most dynamic international company in our business. But it is, because it follows an OTX strategy, which is right for the company, very little direct-to-consumer marketing, driving their brands through the doctors, particularly pediatricians, and the pharmacist. And their brands are Pedialyte, which we bring into our database. Some people don't, but we bring it in because we think as an anti-diarrheal rehydration brand, it fits into the data set. And Dufalat, which is one of their international brands, although, of course, Mylan owns the brands in the developed world. So let's move on to the second half of this presentation. So that's what's happened, with a few indications of how we expect the market to develop going forward. Now, some of you will know that I'm writing the 3rd edition of my book, New Paradigms for OTC. Subtitle is Over the Horizon, and that will be coming out in the next month or two. And in that, we're looking at what are the really new aspects of the market, or what are the revitalized parts of the market that we do know about, but perhaps we're not using to the full extent. And so I've come up with this concept of an infinity zone. Now, of course, there's no such thing as infinity in an OTC sense or a CHC sense, because we're not going to go beyond the solar system. But if we think of markets or opportunities that will give us much more growth in the future, I see 10 of those, and one I'm calling +1, and you'll see at the very end what I mean by this. And we have about 30 minutes to show these to you, and might even have time for a question or two. So first of these is prevention. Now, prevention is something that we've talked about a lot in the industry, but it really is taking root. And those of you who come regularly to these meetings will know that I've shown this slide. I'll show global, then Europe. And I marked the slides, and these are the fastest growing categories, and I marked them in red for categories which prevent, which you take in advance as a preventive measure. And then the black ones are treatment or intervention. And every year, the number of red lines gets more and the number of black lines for treatment gets less. So here's the latest data set. Oh, having we mentioned here, prevention is better than cure, and Benjamin Franklin says an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So as you can see, these are the top growth categories in retail. We only have retail data at the moment at the subcategory level. And now you can see that 2/3 are prevention. 5 years ago, it was 1/3. It's a major change. Consumer is more interested in preventing disease than getting sick and getting cured. And marketers are pushing these categories. And the fastest growing, it's very small, is erectile dysfunction, which has started its launch in New Zealand, has had 4 launches in Poland, and then Viagra Connect in the UK, which has done, I think, reasonably well. And then probiotics, and you can read them all. In Europe, we're still not as preventive as globally. In Europe, we still require, we still have the mindset that we get sick, then we talk to a doctor or a pharmacist, we buy a treatment for it. So we have only 1/3 of the top categories of preventive. Globally, it's 2/3. And if you stripped Europe out of global, it would be even more than 2/3. And probiotics is a great preventive product. It's gone from being an adjacency to being a mainstream. My colleague Ekaterina did the presentation on probiotics in previous years, so we won't repeat that. Just to say that probiotics is globally still the fastest growing category, apart from erectile dysfunction, and it's still, in Europe, it's still the category that has given the most additional euros to the market. It's given, in the last 5 years, an extra 319 million euros at factory prices, and it's now delivering more than the really big categories like analgesics, cough and cold, and the like. The third is food intolerance, and that's something that I don't think as an industry we've spoken about very much, and I certainly haven't addressed it at these conferences. Food intolerance, with the addition in most processed foods of the additives, with the fact that many people in the world are changing their diet, both in terms of eating less healthy food, but also in certain parts of the world are eating Western diets where the digestive system has really evolved over many generations to, for example, consume rice rather than bread, or fish rather than meat, and vegetables more than protein. And that's creating a huge increase in food intolerance. And you know yourselves, I mean, I have team members on my staff who have various forms of food intolerance, and you will know that, whether it's beans, whether it's milk, whether it's gluten, there are just so many of these. It's important to say that food allergy, which creates an immune reaction and which generally is taken care of by our anti-allergy medicines, is not the same as food intolerance, which is much more about the difficulty of digesting. Now, I'm not going to give a figure today, although we are working on making some estimates which will be published in the New Paradigms report, but we're really convinced that this will be an important part of the GI's category, the gastro category, or we may even break it out into a separate category. But I took this down from the internet, dark circles under the eyes, which in my case is because I was working on my presentation very late last night, not because I have food intolerance. But the symptoms of food intolerance: blocked sinuses, eczema, exhaustion, tiredness, bloating, wind, diarrhea, stomach cramps, headaches, migraines, and many others. are the symptoms of food intolerance. So think of that as an opportunity. Think about the cross-branding opportunities. If you have a mainstream brand in the traditional treatments for any of these conditions, I think we'll be talking a lot about this category in the future. My only concern is that, as with functional foods, I think our competitors will not be each other. I think they'll be the mainstream food companies who, if they see an opportunity with scale, will move into it, just as they did in functional foods. The fourth is natural and organic, and this isn't exactly a new trend, but it's one that seems to have come to the notice of the major multinationals in the last 1 or 2 years. And if you look at all the wholesome foods that in some instances are being reduced into medicines or supplements, we're seeing that organic is now an important card to play. The US Department of Agriculture seal of approval is now being seen on vitamins, minerals, and supplements in the United States. And it's behind Johnson & Johnson's purchase of Zarbee's, which is a honey-based product, particularly positioned at children. It's interesting when you see that Johnson & Johnson sold the Compeed brand, which had revenues of over 100 million euros, because they said that that was too small a brand, but have bought a brand with $70 million of sales because they say this is the future. So I think we'll be seeing a lot more about this, and my colleagues, Ian Crook, who's here, the manager of our reports business, working with Nina, did produce recently a very good report on natural and organic products. Then cannabis, CBD, the one that is getting a lot of us talking at the moment. There are some amazing statistics. One that I came across the other day really had me very, very interested. In Australia, the inward investment into the cannabis industry, which is in its very early stages, is $1 billion of investment in terms of private equity buying local producers for a market whose value at the moment is only 2 million of sales. So 1 billion has been banked and, as you might say, is being staked on a market that hasn't yet evolved in Australia. And it will. So we're seeing a lot of advertising. We're seeing many products being sold on the internet, on Amazon. Many, many states in the United States have now approved the sale of hemp oil. We're seeing cannabis being legalized in some countries and states in the United States. And although the science has a long way to go, the implications are that cannabis and CBD, as we will probably come to talk about it more, is being positioned for many, many indications. If you look at top right, ADHD, so cannabis is or CBD is very much being positioned for mood and stress. Irritable bowel, fibromyalgia, you can read them all. CBT, the botanical solution to pain. And I love sites that tell me that they will give everything we need to know. I only wish that was true. The important thing is that it's, as you probably know better than I do, that it's all to do with THC and CBD. THC is the addictive substance in cannabis and marijuana, and you don't want much of that. And that has to be less than 0.3% to get any sort of approval. And the CBD, which is the beneficial part of this, is what you do want. And here we have a brand. They claim to be the leader in the US, Barleans. They claim that in their version of hemp, which is botanically very similar to marijuana, they have 20% compared with most leaves, which have 10%. Now, if you look on the internet, there are millions, literally millions of articles. There are many reports, and it's been extremely hard to try and make sense of this. And it's an emerging market, poorly audited. The data is not robust. But it's our job to try and make sense of this. So I'm offering this in a sort of a very tentative way. I think the figures will be slightly different when we publish the report. Next year, I'm sure, will be very different when we start to incorporate CBD into DB6. We took a decision in the early hours of this morning. We are not putting CBD into our forecasts with this version of DB6. Next year, we will definitely include it. It's too important not to. So let's try and put some shape to this. And I'm putting here this symbol because I think Canada has changed a lot of minds, because Canada is the first major economy Uruguay was the first, but it's quite small. But Canada is the first G7 country which is legalizing cannabis for lifestyle use. That's, you know, lean back and enjoy life, and for medical cannabis. And the medical cannabis regulations are still to be published, but they'll, we expect, be very liberal. So the first is, and there is already, a prescription medical cannabis market. It's huge, and it's going to be bigger, and we have a speaker later today who will tell you with much more authority than I will how this market is going to evolve. But it's not in scope for us. It's not going to be a consumer product. It will be a source of switch opportunity. So there is no OTC medical cannabis market at the moment in the sense of being a regulated market, but it will come. It's not now. It will be switched, we think, after 2023, so not in the next 5-year forecasts, but up to 28, it will definitely be in our figures next year, and it will be huge. And then what we have is the supplements market and a topical pain relief market and other benefits being promised through topicals. And you hear amazing figures. You hear figures of 30 million, you hear figures at the upper end of about $800 million. My colleague Liz Cummings, who runs our US operation, and this is very much being driven out of the US, has done a lot of work and has finally decided that we'll be going with some figures that have been collected by the Nutrition Business Journal, which said that hemp, which is the legal form in some countries, in some states of the United States, last year was about $238 million at consumer prices and is growing at 36% a year. We've worked that back to manufacturers' prices. We've added in a couple of extra sales that we don't think NBJ, Nutrition Business Journal, would be picking up. And on the assumption, and it is an assumption, that the US is probably 70% of the world market, we think that the VMS and topicals CBD market, almost exclusively hemp products, is worth about 250 million euros. But that is very, very estimated, almost to the level of guesstimated, but in the next 2 months onwards, we'll have better figures. But this is a pivotal year because both CVS and Walgreens, which are the two big drugstore chains in the US, have both announced that in those states where it's legal to sell these products as consumer products, hemp-based products, they will be on sale. And when you get a big drug chain getting behind the products, you can believe two things will happen. A huge increase, or at least a satisfaction of unmet consumer demand, and some sort of regulation, because whereas a health food store will put almost anything, and I'm not talking about chains, I'm talking independents, will put almost anything on the shelf, an organization like CVS, and even more so Walgreens, will be very, very selective on what it puts on the shelf. So that, we think, is going to be significant, which is why we think this is the most important year, 2019, for this category. So my best estimate for 2023 which is 5 years, of where this category, VMS and topicals, so not yet a registered category, where that will go, I think it will be about 2 billion euros. But I have a little bit more work to do before making that a hard number. The two other categories are CBD for beauty and food. We're not looking at that. That's completely outside scope. And the lifestyle, marijuana. And I know we have friends here from Holland. If you don't mind me saying, when I went to ASGP last year, I floated from the railway station to the hotel because there was just so much weed in the air. Maybe that's why people like to go to Amsterdam. And if you ask me where this is all going, that's what I think we're heading for. When the category gets a switch, so the RX products, which are in many countries only just coming into the marketplace, overcoming the resistance of regulators, doctors, and pharmacists, when we start to see part of that switched into the OTC market, I would think that within 10 years, we'll be looking at a category of 10 billion at factory, 20 billion at retail, and I think when you hear our speaker this afternoon and you read some of the other published reports, you'll probably say my figures are a bit on the low side. No connection between CBD and sexual health, I promise you, but it just happens to be that sexual health is the next one on the list. And that photograph has to be about erectile dysfunction. And this is a slide I took from last year. Now, Bayer, which is the owner of Levitra, has made it very clear it will not switch. Pfizer, we thought, wasn't going to switch, but the launch of Viagra Connect in the UK, which has had pretty good sales, we think, although it's hard to get the data because Boots suppresses the data because they have a dominant share in distribution, but we think that what we've heard, it's going very well. And we know that, that Sanofi is held up in regulatory with Cialis. There is a member of the evaluation committee that just won't give way on the public health advantages of erectile dysfunction products. All along, it's been a concern of mine that this would become a very miserable category, all about treatment rather than pleasure, whereas in another branch of sexual health, we see how Reckitt Benckiser is doing with making Durex a very happy brand. So I've revised my estimate. I thought that this market would be worth about 20 billion. Because of the regulatory problems, which seem to be much greater than I thought they would be, I'm bringing that down, but it's still very, very substantial. We still think this category, including the oral contraceptive over-the-counter, the morning-after pill, the condoms and other forms of barrier method, and the erectile dysfunction products, will achieve about 10 billion within the next 10 years. Here's just the TV commercial for Viagra Connect.
what you are. 4.3 million men in the UK experience erectile problems. Viagra Connect is now available without prescription.
So our consulting division did the first evaluation of the potential for this category about 7 or 8 years ago in Europe for Lilly. And I can say I think this is now no longer a current issue. Lilly said, we only want to look at the serious market for treating a medical problem. And we said, but 75% of the usage of this will be for fun. And Lilly said, maybe because they're a Midwestern company, we don't believe in fun. So anyway, but I think it's great that Pfizer have produced the ad they have, and have surprised me because they are putting fun and enjoyment into the cell. The seventh is e-commerce. We need to say no more. We've already looked at that, but it is definitely an infinity zone. The reason I put it here, apart from the fact, of course, it is going to be a major source of growth for us, is that we must not forget pharmacy without the E. Bricks and mortar is so important. And pharmacy point of care, where the pharmacist and the pharmacy assistants become our ambassadors, is still the heart of the industry. It's still the bedrock at the moment. In retail, pharmacy is about 80%. And if you take out the US, it's about 90%. Then if you build in the other channels, pharmacy is still around about 70% of all sales of consumer healthcare products. And that's why it's so important to have the pharmacists engage with the consumer, to offer them training programs to show them how to maintain their customer loyalty, how to offer loyalty schemes, how to manage their practice, traffic flow, whatever. Now, when I mentioned that at the US OTC Association, CHIPA, I had the privilege to moderate the leadership panel, and one of the 3 questions we talked about was big data, how the availability of data is both good and bad, and what the impact that would have on healthcare in general and consumer healthcare. And it was an illuminating session with real experts telling us how they thought it would develop. But if we think about, and you can define this in many ways, if we think about the 5 major tech companies, Google, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, and the one that will be the biggest of all, I think, in the future is Alibaba, with the way that they dominate information, our colleagues in the fantastic workshop yesterday, the digital engagement workshop, were saying that Alibaba just owns every aspect now in China. They own WeChat. My network partner in Beijing now does not read emails at all. If you don't send communication via WeChat, which is the local equivalent of WhatsApp, not going to read it, not going to read it. It's also how you pay your bills, order your taxi, order everything, in fact. It's a bank as well as a platform. And it's fascinating. And when Tim Cook earlier this year said that Apple's greatest contribution to mankind will be health, that's fascinating. But of course, what we're also seeing is the bad side of big tech owning our data and all the fines that Google has paid in Europe for abusing its position with Facebook and Cambridge Analytics and the like. It is frightening. Now, in a moment, I'm going to show you a very short BBC video that talks to that and talks to the emerging markets. Now, the emerging markets is about 55% of turnover in the retail OTC consumer healthcare market. And when we do the analysis of the different channels, the additional channels, it will be exactly the same because we have very high penetration for both direct and e-commerce in China and other countries. And it's right that we should take that view, because if you look, this is from World Economic Forum last July, which then said they thought the global outlook for the economy was 3.9%. Now that's been moderated. The latest figures are 3.5%. The advanced economies, I should say, the growth rate is falling. In 2019, it's expected that the advanced economies will be only 2%, and the emerging markets will be growing at 5%, even though China is definitely not as growth-oriented as it was in the past. Now, putting that and big data together, I just pulled off the BBC website yesterday, a very small clip. The sound isn't great. I don't think we're supposed to have downloaded it, so my IT manager found a way of doing it. But I just thought it was so interesting, the themes that come up.
By 2039, the world will look and feel very different. The rate of change is itself speeding up. And 20 years from now, power will have shifted dramatically. So who might be up and who might be down 20 years from now? Let me take you on a journey of possibles. Up, Africa. A rapidly increasing population could fuel Africa's surging economic growth, with a pool of young, better educated and globally connected workers. But the biggest revolution in Africa might be the spread of vast super arrays of far cheaper solar panels. To quote one energy guru, the world will have learnt to put solar panels where the sun actually shines. Also up, China. The superpower. After cornering many of the world's vital raw materials, could it now control both its own people and many other countries struggling to repay its loans? Could we see a world where China exerts its influence through movies and music too? But if there are winners, which countries could be losers by 2039? Down, perhaps most of Europe. Financial services and banking will be overwhelmingly driven by AI, so Europe loses much of its global edge. Parents who once urged children to become lawyers and doctors begged them to become designers, artists, even actors. Anything creative, not easily done by robots. Down, but not out, the United States of America, eclipsed by China and paying a price for getting late to wind and solar. Also down, the Middle East, largely ignored internationally because no one needs its oil and gas anymore. So what commodities could be driving the future in 2039? Fossil fuels have become the new forbidden fruit. Oil has lost most of its value. Alternative fuels plus a collapse in the use of plastics has seen to that. Water, clean water, will be more precious than ever. Water wars have replaced oil wars. Along the Nile or any mighty river, conflicts could break out as states closest to the sea fight those further upstream accused of taking too much of the water. Data, however, will be king. By 2039, more and more is being bought and sold, mostly illegally and in secret. All governments will rely on data as the method of control. Some countries will have followed the Scandinavian lead by choosing near total transparency of tax returns, earnings, lifestyles to reduce the secret data threat. And more citizens everywhere could be fighting back, becoming data refuseniks. Fed up with the negative effects of social media, will they simply abandon cyberspace wherever they can, minimizing their electronic footprint, even reverting to writing and delivering private messages by hand?
I just wish I hadn't thrown away my fountain pen. So I said 10 infinity zones plus one, and that's vaping. And vaping, I think, is the opportunity that got away from us. The problem is that we can't make up our mind as individuals, governments, scientists, regulators, about whether e-cigarettes and vaping is a good thing or a bad thing. So here's something, this picture research was done, I did it myself about 2 days ago. So here we have one of a huge number of websites and advertisements that says, vaping is terrible. It's going to make people smoke more, not less. And that's very much the feeling in the United States, and it says, get outraged. Now, in the UK, the Cancer Research Association said it's a good thing. The evidence so far shows that e-cigarettes are far safer than smoking, and if you want to have some nicotine, there is only one way to do it, which is vaping. There's another one that says, but there are better ways because lifestyle and willpower are even better. Then we have this amazing product, Juul. Philip Morris, or its parent company Altria, has paid $13 billion for a minority shareholding in Juul, which has a dominant market share, 75% market share in the US, which means that the capitalization of this company is $30 billion. But there's massive campaigns going on in the US tracking the usage of Juul by kids. Now here's one I picked up. Nearly 1 in 5 students between 12 and 17 have seen Juul used in school. Now, 2 or 3 years ago, I thought, and more than thought, we were a small part of a program by one tobacco company to become part of a registered e-cigarettes program that would bring products to market, that would have major marketing initiatives, that would have big market share. That didn't happen. The company returned the rights to the originator. That whole program seems to be in abeyance, which is a great pity. The latest report that looks reliable says that vaping in 2025, include e-cigarettes and vaping, will be, and I've adapted their figures because they gave a figure at retail. I've taken it back to factory prices and I put it from dollars into euros. But according to that report, 30 billion. And if we could have done many things, including persuaded, if it's right, to persuade regulators that there is a benefit for an OTC version of this regulated with proper clinical trials, and had made a switch, we would have expected this category to have been about 5 billion. But it won't happen. It won't happen because there isn't the commitment. The pharmaceutical industry doesn't want to be involved. The tobacco industry, of course, is heavily involved in this and sees this as its development. The regulators in the major countries are against this. So this is the one that isn't in the infinity zone. It's one that could have happened but didn't. So those of you who were here last year and the year before will know that he doesn't know it, but Mo Farah is our brand ambassador. It's just as well he doesn't know it, although he may be watching us live streaming because he'll ask for a big royalty. But anyway, we think Mo Farah is fantastic because he's a great athlete, because he's retraining, as you know, to become a marathon runner, and he will, I expect, to be gold medalist at the next Olympics in marathon. Now, the reason we showed Mo, and I'm not going into the full story, we've done that before, is that we say that he wins because he has a very fast pace, and we need to adopt that fast pace. And pace means pharmacy, it means adjacencies, it means looking at CBD. It means looking at natural and herbal products. And all the adjacent categories that we've seen, and indeed the different channels of distribution. Getting closer to the consumer and taking the many advantages of e-commerce. So that's the keynote address. That's looking over the horizon. That's looking at what will be the big trends in the future. Where will be our infinity zones? These are where we have to play if we want to see the organic growth that we haven't had in the industry, if the major multinationals want to grow organically as well as by acquisition. We talk a lot about innovation, but there's not a lot of it other than what comes from prescription to OTC switch. We announced last year the creation of the Innovation Connection, which is a joint venture between ourselves and Compass Healthcare. They are here with a stand outside. We have 12 brands, we have 70 SKUs for anyone who are looking for in-licensing opportunities. Please talk to Paul Fraundorfer and Andrew Gibsons and Agatha Lorek, who are outside. And in the networking hour, there will be 3 mini presentations of 3 of those brands for anyone who wants, and I hope you will go to see those mini presentations. In the meantime, we're here to help you to pick up the pace. That's why, amongst other things, we run these conferences. We have a fantastic range of speakers. We've got the great networking hour. We hope that everybody is going to come to the wonderful dinner tonight. For those who were with us at the digital engagement workshop yesterday, apologies that it was so cramped. The reason was we had a lot of very last-minute bookings. But I know Dave and Shane, who are here, and Dave's he's taking his underwear off this afternoon. It's an amazing experience, and I've seen it before. He's our inspirational speaker at the end of the day, talking to you about his underwear. Anyway, so for those who were at the workshop yesterday, thank you so much. For those of you who are here today, of course, thank you again. Enjoy the rest of the conferences. I'm actually now -6 seconds, so I don't get any questions, and I did that quite deliberately. But I'm around if you want to talk to me, so I'm returning the meeting now to Nina. So thank you, everybody.
Nicholas, thank you very much. Great presentation. My only comment is that, bearing in mind the portfolios of many of the companies in the room, they have a lot of thinking to do if they want to keep up the pace in terms of moving into those adjacencies and new categories. I'm going to take the second speaker now. Tamara Rogers comes to us from one of those big companies, and one that's about to get even bigger. She comes from GSK, of course, now really working very hard on the amalgamation with Pfizer Consumer Health that Nicholas mentioned. She won't be talking about any of that, I'm quite sure, because that's all under covers and should remain so. But Tamara is actually fairly new to this industry. Is it a year, couple of years? Just a year. Previously ran a business for Unilever, mainly in the US, and you can tell she's really smart. She was telling me this morning that her office was based in New Jersey, but she decided to live in New York because she can commute when the roads going out of New York were really empty in the morning, so she did it in half the time. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what you've got to say, and welcome to our conference. Okay.
Thank you very much. Very kind introduction. Try and balance everything everywhere. So I'm absolutely delighted to be here today to talk about the future of healthcare and how we as consumers are wanting to get more control over our health, aided by the kind of device that I'm wearing on my wrist. And I actually just made sure that I put my phone onto airplane mode, because I still haven't figured out how to make this not ring when that's ringing. I thought that would just be typical, wouldn't it, if I was on stage and then suddenly my phone starts ringing. I'm a wanderer and I'm not supposed to go over here. I'm going to try and stay over here. I can't help it. I walk in front of my charts. So yes, I am relatively new to the healthcare industry, but I have forever had a lifelong obsession about the human body. And that's not necessarily Viagra related, but I do love human physiology, and I've always been interested. In fact, at one point, I wanted to be a doctor. And so I love this world of health and wellness. And I have to say, it was the happiest day when I started at GSK. It was literally a year and a quarter, and I know it's a quarter because we're at that point where we're closing a quarter and we're having a look at results. And it is an exciting time. I can't talk about the Pfizer piece, but it is making life just a little doubly busy, but really phenomenally exciting. And I couldn't believe, actually coming from an industry that I was in before in Unilever, that the biggest player in OTC could only have 7% market share. I'm used to very different levels of market share, so a different level of consolidation. Presenting to you guys and the wisdom of kids. She's like, why are you nervous? You're talking to a room of people who are just as passionate about the healthcare industry as you are. And she's absolutely right, and I'm very proud actually that she wants to go into and study human physiology as well, so another girl into science, which we need to do much, much more of. So the industry is changing. We've talked an awful lot about, let's change charts. How do we change this? Is this the click away? Thank you. Disruption, and you have to deal with changes in the moment. Everybody's sick of hearing this, I think. You know, we know we're living in disruptive times, and every industry is being disrupted. But I joined GSK at a moment where we are doing so many exciting different things, responding to that kind of marketplace. And I don't think there is any business that isn't going through this kind of disruption. That's a good one. Now we're going backwards. I don't know if we can get these charts working. No, apparently not. Is there a way of getting it to go to the next one? And Nicholas already touched a bit on this in terms of what is the most valuable resource. And you'll probably remember, hopefully, I don't know why these are not moving. Can you help me a little bit at the back there? It was working earlier. Thank you. Okay, so you probably remember this edition of The Economist, which had the world's most valuable resource, and that was data. Now, we know that there is masses and masses of data, but actually it reminds me a little bit of that quote which is connected to the oceans here as well, which is water, water all around and not a drop to drink. And we can be drowning in data. And without the ability to have really good insight, which comes from knowing what to ask in terms of the right questions, then the data, the amount of data is irrelevant. It's what we do with it that really, really matters. 90% of the world's data actually was created in the last 2 years. That's incredible. And in fact, 2.5, I think it's quintabytes of data, it's a fantastic word, are created every single day. So no wonder we feel like we're slightly drowning in all of this data. And these guys, if the chart will move, I don't know what's the matter with the clicker. So this just shows you, if you know Moore's law, which actually was back from the semiconductor industry, and saw the doubling, basically, of data. So the digital technology industry is accelerating and doubling all the time. So it's on an exponential curve. So where we had the internet and things felt quite comfortable, things feel quite flat, we then move into social media, actually suddenly you hit this part of the exponential curve and suddenly it feels very uncomfortable and very disruptive. And we are now here. So if you went to CES, the Consumer Electronics Show in the US, you would have heard all sorts about 5G, which is now the next speed at which data can be traveling. It travels faster than the human brain can actually process. And that's going to unlock unbelievable services for consumers and new technology. So we are already in this world of artificial intelligence, machine learning. Lots of talk actually about artificial intelligence. Often it's just machine learnings and algorithms. Quantum computing, blockchain, which I love, and one of the guys I work with keeps calling it chain block just to show how he doesn't really understand it, and it is a tricky subject. The Internet of Things, so your fridge ordering your groceries when you're running down, that kind of, your house being enabled. And robotics, and the sort of fear that robotics and all this stuff is going to take over roles. And I do think, genuinely, with 2 kids, thinking about what the future of employment will be is a fascinating, exciting, but scary topic. So we are right here. And of course, these guys really know that. Their whole business, as Nicholas said, is based on big data. And they have been able to think about how they disrupt industries, and they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And to the fact that I think you also mentioned this one, a lot of these companies are looking, they're almost like an activist investor. And at Unilever, when Kraft Heinz came after us, I knew exactly how that felt. And for those, I know there's a few folks from P&G, having someone like Nelson Peltz on the board, this activist investor approach is looking for hunting out cost in industry, looking at fat margins. Now, the healthcare industry in the US is a difficult and challenging one, and I live there. It's very bureaucratic, it's very slow, and there is quite a bit of cost tied up in that. So no surprise then that a company like Amazon get together with Berkshire Hathaway and JP Morgan to see what they can do to reinvent the healthcare business in the United States, because they're bringing that kind of retail pricing transparency and models and having a look how they can apply that to healthcare. And as Nicholas also said, Amazon moving into healthcare. So imagine a beautiful kind of white clinic. They are starting first with the health and wellness of their employees, a great place to start if you're in healthcare. But you've also got Uber wanting to now compete with ambulances, and they reckon that they can get a vehicle to you if you're in trouble faster than an ambulance can get to you. So again, all of this stuff is transforming. I'm going to go to the next chart. But it's not just the big guys. We now face the startup kids. And every industry, and particularly the one I was in before, saw lots and lots of new local players. And those local players know something in common with the big players. And that is that we are not all the same. I am not a housewife 25 to 40. In fact, I've just left that kind of 40s space. But I am not a generic buying target. I am an individual. And these small startups know that, they get that, and they are all about relevance and how they can serve and personalize. And this thought of push less, push better, actually I don't think it is about pushing, it's about how do you get that pull? How do you get the consumer desire so that they're pulling? And this one, this is 23andMe. GSK has an association with 23andMe. It's more in the sort of pharma side. I would love to get into this, but it's in the pharma side. And this is aggregated, non-personalized data. But 23andMe help you understand your DNA. I think it's something like 99.5% of our DNA is common. So it's a very tiny amount of those 3 billion bits of data about you on your DNA that make you an individual and make you different. And so people are now able to understand what their DNA is, what sort of things they may face in the future. And 23andMe were the first FDA-approved test for the BRCA1 gene, which means you may be at risk of breast cancer. And they've been able to communicate that with the consumers who subscribe to their service if they want to know those sorts of things. And they've had another, I think, further 10 disease areas that they've been approved by the FDA to actually test into to give consumer a kind of risk profile of what they may face. So we're getting very, very data-driven now down at the individual level. So whether that's your media preferences online or even your DNA and who you are. And this is going even further. So this is a really cool one. So this is called Nudge DNA. And this is for pre-diabetic patients. So you can have your saliva tested, you can have a look to see if there's any of the kind of codes that would suggest that you may have a propensity towards obesity or high blood pressure. And you take this app with you. It's being tested with Waitrose in the UK. And you can scan your food choices. And it will give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down as to whether or not it's a good idea for you. And so this is tracking kind of both what people are wanting to eat, but also how they're using the app and how that helps them with better outcomes around their health. Because we know that if you can improve your diet, improve exercise, improve your regime, you can actually avoid going further from the diabetes phase into full-blown diabetes. So some really useful devices that are helping people manage their health. Okay, so this is Project Baseline. So a company called Verily, who are part of Alphabet, who used to or may still be part of Google. So think about Google Maps, and now we're trying to map human health. So they are working with Stanford University, and they've got a number of individuals, and they're looking at all sorts of things. So whether or not how much sleep you've had, what you've been eating, your heart rate. They even potentially look at DNA, immunization records. They're building up this map of human health and trying to get to see if they can see some common characteristics. So you can imagine this is a very exciting project to see if we can understand human health better, really fueled by some pretty big tech and big data. This is a lovely one. So this is scientists at MIT are working with robots and with children who are on the autism spectrum. Working with children with autism, and some of you may have a child with autism or know people who have. That kind of reliable, consistent routine and consistency, a really important part of educating and interacting with children. And robots can be pretty scary, but kids very quickly actually get comfortable around them. And what the MIT scientists are doing, they are with machine learning and natural linguistics interpretation, they're getting the robots to study the kids that they're interacting with, and they're looking at everything from facial expressions and gestures to heart rate to sweat production, and they're really starting to understand the emotion of the kids that they are interacting with, and so they're able to respond appropriately as they're learning what the mood and the reaction that they're getting from the kids. So potentially a really interesting way of helping children to learn. So that's kind of how robotics are helping us. And now into kind of the doctor in your pocket. So this is doc.ai, and you put all of your omics data in here. So all of your kind of performance data. You can also put any tests that you've had all into doc.ai, and it summarizes for you your health status. And then it says, here are my predictions, but don't forget to discuss these with my carbon-based colleague, who is the doctor. And so this ability to collect data, and I don't know how many of you have kind of been in a surgery with a doctor, and sometimes they do turn to the internet and they start searching. And the burden of care on a doctor is significant. And often they're looking only for data that they have generated themselves, data that they can trust. But now, many doctors are open to taking the data sets from the patient, who has, let's face it, the biggest interest in making sure that there is as much data about them as possible, to help a doctor who only has a very short amount of time to see you, to just be a contributor to any diagnosis. This one I think is phenomenal. So this is a pill that you can take that has a little sensor in it by a company called Proteus, and it tracks whether or not you're taking your medication. Now, this is particularly important with mental health patients. I have a good friend whose husband is just going through that diagnosis, and he just does not want to be described as having a mental health issue. For him, it's a real issue, and it's an issue that we're facing in society. And he won't take his meds. But what this little sensor does is it tells you when you've taken your meds. So if you don't have a great memory or you're struggling, it's great for that, but it's also a really good way of seeing whether or not people are taking their meds. So again, this sort of application of tech into health. Now, a lot of doctors are rejecting this, and you never want to be the person that says, Royal College of GPs say no app can replace human physicians. You just know that when you've said something like that, you could be proven wrong. And it is because there is nothing like talking to a patient and understanding not only the data, but also the behavioral and psychological sides of how somebody is. So this is Babylon Health, which is a really interactive system in the UK and doing extremely well. And in fact, I think now working with the NHS. So more to come on that. So whilst there is this kind of world out there of potential future startups, and who knows which ones will succeed, we are already tracking ourselves to oblivion. So whether it's a Fitbit, whether it's the Apple Watch, and Apple are working again with Stanford, and they have, over the last 8 months, they've been tracking around 400,000 people, getting the data to see if they can spot atrial fibrillation, to see if it's a predictor of a heart issue. And if you start to see some signs, and they're putting an ECG on you so that they can get more data. So that's the sort of basic happening now today. And then this guy, I think, is amazing. So I don't know if you've heard of Larry Smarr. Larry is a physicist. He works at the Californian Institute of Telecommunications and Information Technology, so kind of uber bright guy. He suffers from Crohn's, so he's using himself as a bit of a study on his own body to understand his own healthcare. He's been DNA sequenced. He takes stool samples, blood samples, so every bit of data that he can have on himself. He's also done like a 3D scan of his internal body. He calls it Transparent Larry. And he was going to have some surgery on his colon. So he invited his surgeon to put on the virtual reality goggles and to walk with him inside his colon before the guy operated. And actually, I don't know if it was a guy or a girl, massive assumption. So did this operation, and it was fascinating because they were able to kind of visually see the inside of the colon before any intervention. And of course, we know that robotic surgery is huge and really starting. So my brother-in-law is actually a robotic surgeon. He can carry out an operation from his hospital in Melbourne on a patient lying on a surgery table in America. So originally done for the army, but actually he can now do that just from his office, so he doesn't actually need to be present with the body, so amazing. So I don't know if we are all, and Larry was the one who inspired the title for this session today. People will have this amount of data. Might be easier in the future to get the amount of data that Larry has about his body. And you will become the person who is most interested, but also holding the information about yourself. And you will be able to use that to help you define the best way forward for your health and wellness. So what does it mean, all this kind of crazy stuff? Some of it's a bit out there, some of it's much further in. But what does it mean for consumer healthcare? And this is one of the questions that we at GSK have been thinking about, and it kind of gets me out of bed every morning with great excitement. So I think, first of all, we are in the era of consumer first. People have talked for years about putting the consumer first, the customer at the heart. But actually, if you don't do this now, you will not succeed. We used to be able to push messages out to people. Now, attention spans are tiny. Where people will go is absolutely up to them. So now you have to think about this as you're inviting a guest into your house. And as they cross the threshold, there's an enormous amount of trust as they come in to engage with you. So you have to think about what you think is important, but you absolutely have to think about what is of interest to them. How many times have you seen a website for a brand being built in kind of worship to that brand, and the brand manager thinks it's amazing, and then you look at it and you think, why would I bother? And that's because it's been built by somebody who loves their brand but has forgotten why the consumer should love their brand. So you've got to get that intersection of what is relevant. A lot of this fits absolutely to the PACE acronym that you described earlier. This is another challenge. So this is the, now we're going even faster. This is the I, we generation. And what this is I want what I want, when I want it, where I want it. So a very, maybe a spoilt generation for somebody from my generation, but I want it now and I want it all. And that has been driven by being serviced in that way. So Amazon Prime, Uber turns up. I mean, I get really frustrated when Uber is not by my door within 3 minutes. And that's partly because of having lived in New York. I've become maybe a bit of an impatient New Yorker. And in London, it's more like 10 minutes, certainly where I live. And every time they cancel on me, it drives me crazy. But, you know, that expectation has now been raised in me and now has to be met. There's pharmacy to you, so we talked about kind of e-com and e-pharmacy. And then Deliveroo in the UK, you can order from any restaurant you want pretty much. On Friday night, in fact, my daughter wanted Thai food, my son wanted curry. So we ended up having two different cuisines delivered by Deliveroo. So this level of expectation and demand is only going to keep increasing. And so how do we serve that? How do we think about how we do that? And then there are different ways of working. So you took PACE, I think, is a perfect acronym because it is about speed and agility. Some of these smaller players are much, much faster because of the way that they work, but they know that they want to get something out there. They've got either a big loan or they're running this on their own money and they need to get it out there. Rather than setting off with a proposal to your board with a big fat number of what you're going to need to land your project. Actually, the way we're working now is to say, this is what we think it might be, because you sort of want to know what you're in for before you start. But you start by saying, I'm only going to spend this amount of money. And in fact, there was great pride when one of the guys I work with, Nick, came in and we were reviewing budgets, and I was like, oh, you're underspent. And he said, yeah, it's great, isn't it? And that mindset really matters. So you say, I'm going to spend this little bit amount of money. I've got this hypothesis, and I'm going to test this hypothesis. And here are the KPIs I expect to achieve. And then you do a sprint. A sprint can be a week, it can be 4 weeks, but it's way, way faster than a normal project plan would be. So you have your hypothesis, You put it out there, you test, you learn, and then you have your Monday morning meeting where you stand up and say, right, this is what I learned this week, this is what I'm doing this week. We even have a kind of project planning board that has post-it notes of what we're going to do each week, and that's because you can literally rip those post-it notes off and stick them somewhere else, and it feels agile. Somehow writing something in a presentation makes it feel finished, perfect, and correct, and so often that's just not true, and it doesn't invite people to kind of get involved and engage with you. So make it scrappy. I call it thinking out loud. And let people into that thinking process. And so you then go again onto the next sprint and then the next sprint. And this is how the startups work. And I'm sure many of you are now exploring this kind of agile way of working in your companies as well. And also this sort of sense of fixed teams, persistent teams, and agile teams. How do you pull in the right people at the right point? But they don't have to be in that project forever. They come in for the phase and the piece that you need them to, go back out again. Really good keeping a founder all the way through, the person who had passion for the original idea, because they're the ones that will drive that timeline. They want to see an idea coming to fruition. So that's just a different way of working. And then this is the one that is the biggest for me. You talked already about data, but if you have somebody's data, even if, like it is for 23andMe, depersonalized, aggregated data, you have a massive responsibility for trust. So at GSK, we talk about wanting to be the most trusted healthcare company in the world. Healthcare industry doesn't have a great rep when it comes to trust. Edelman, a big PR agency, do something called their trust barometer every year. Consumers, people have very little trust in big companies, very little trust in governments. I have to say in the UK that's getting even worse very fast. I'm actually wondering whether I whip out my Zambian passport because I was born in Zambia and whether that will be better for me than my British one next year. But very little trust in big associations, professional people who are supposed to be doing better for everybody, very little trust. Actually, one of the things we've seen most increasing recently is the relationship and the trust bond between employees and their employer. So that came out of the most recent Edelman survey, that actually people really do trust the companies that they work for. And you really need to build that trust. It's one of the few relationships that is starting to emerge. But the people that people trust are their friends and the people around them, the people that they know. They almost would trust somebody that they bump into in the supermarket, and you often see, more often women doing this, just strike up a conversation with a complete stranger in front of the shelf or in front of something, and you trust that individual more than you trust a big company who goes through lots of clinical testing and all the stuff that we do to try and make sure we're engendering trust. Really hard to earn, really fast to lose overnight. And so there is no middle ground with trust. And so if you have data, it's not there for your commercial exploitation. Think first about the consumer and what you can do for the consumer and how you're looking after the consumer, patient, or shopper. And that will lead you to business success. So start by thinking about how you look after the health and the wellness and what you can do to have a positive difference. And I promise you that will lead to great business results. So, as I said, massive thank you for hearing me out this morning and for managing with me a little bit as the slides jump around. But at GSK, our desire to be the most innovative, best performing, and particularly most trusted healthcare company in the world is something that makes me super excited, and I'm delighted that I could be here with a bunch of other people who love healthcare too. I don't know whether I have 3-4 questions for minutes for questions. Get them in the right order. So if anybody has a question, I'm happy to answer on anything, apart from obviously the joint venture, which the only thing I can say there is it's exciting.
Can I ask if we have any questions? Please put your hand up. Yes, we'll get a microphone to you, Lillian, please, here. Keep your hand up so that the microphone can reach you.
Tamara,
Hi.
thank you very much for an excellent presentation. 2 questions, if you may allow me. 2? Only, yeah, they are connected with each other. The first one is, how does your cooperation with 23andMe between GSK and 23andMe concretely work? And second one, are there any measures or initiatives which you may in this circle communicate now, coming out from these messages which you gave in terms of the consumer is his own CEO?
Okay, cool. So 23andMe, I can't talk a great deal about, partly because I don't get to play there. So it's more with our pharma business. So Hal Barron, who's the head of R&D at GSK, is very, very excited because the shared purpose between 23andMe and GSK is around helping to shorten clinical trials and clinical data, because you can try and find big groups, big numbers of people to do tests on that you know are going to be better fit and either suffer from the issue that you're trying to solve. And so you're really narrowing down the chances of getting the right consumers into and the right patients into those sorts of trials. So that's the sort of collaboration, and there are agreed areas where they're working together to explore where we can then hopefully develop better, more effective medicines faster in that type of way. So not a deep expert on that, but that's the 23andMe space. And then in terms of things that I can talk about, so GSK, first consumer healthcare company to work with Google to have our own tech stack. And what that means essentially is all of our media buying goes through that tech stack, and all of the responses that the consumer has. So let's just say it's a Voltaren ad, and you serve up somebody who's suffering from back pain or knee pain, and you know where they click. So if it's knee pain, you know that they've clicked on that ad. You don't know, we don't get the individual data, but we know, and the great kind of protection that the machine has between the company and individuals gives that anonymity. So we now know that these people are interested in issues with their knee. Then we can then send more relevant knee-based communications rather than back. So having a tech stack is enabling us to both buy programmatic data, programmatic content, TV advertising even, and any digital communications, and make us much more relevant, which reduces our cost per contact. So you've got an efficiency and an effectiveness benefit from having that tech stack. So that will be an example. And then we're sprinting on a number of projects, partly because we just want to make even new formulations in packaging to market faster. But we're also in the era now where products will go beyond just the formulation and packaging on a shelf. And you're seeing this happening in every industry. We're moving from products to services. So we're exploring that kind of space. So no, we're not looking at anything at the moment in robotics, but I'm going to move on to somebody else, because otherwise you'll have had 3 questions. Thank you, they're great questions. Anybody else?
Do we have another question? Any hands up?
If not, we can always go back.
No, I'd actually like to ask you a question, something you were talking about in terms of the fact that we're all now very well informed, and we're all now very well informed when we go to see our doctors.
Yes.
Do you think we've reached the tipping point, as your slides suggested, that doctors no longer resent the informed patient? Because the number of times I've gone and I mean, okay, fine, we all know because we've been on the internet that we've got all of those symptoms, therefore we will die tomorrow, so the doctors should sort it quickly. Yeah. But I just wonder how you think we're getting there with the doctors.
I don't think we are. I really don't think we are. I think that it's the world's worst nightmare for a doctor when a patient walks in having spoken to kind of doctor internet. Because then if they have diagnosed themselves incorrectly, the doctor then has to take extra time to then appraise them of the right information and get them on the right track of treatment. So I don't think we're there yet. And that's partly because a lot of the data services and the apps and the tech isn't quite there yet. But as soon as that, and Babylon have claimed that they are more accurate than a GP, as soon as we get that level of accuracy, and I'm quite sure as kids like my daughter go through medical school, you're going to have kids who are emerging who are digital natives, and that kind of trust in big data sets. It will change, but we're not yet at that tipping point, I don't think.
Thank you. No more hands up, so I'm just going to say a really big thank you. That was a great start for our morning, following on from Nicholas. Will you be around to talk to people for the rest of the conference?
Yes, I will do my best.
Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving from a very large multinational to a smaller specialist company, but one that's really motoring and doing a lot of good things. I'm going to introduce you to Luca Pagano from BeMyEye. Luca actually did a little pop-up presentation last year during Nicholas's session. We've been working quite closely with BeMyEye because they're such an exciting company. And I have to read exactly how Luca describes the company. BeMyEye is the European leader in data-driven field marketing. Now, we've seen quite a lot of what that means and how they actually collect data and how they actually work very closely and rapidly with clients to maximize performance of brands in the retail marketplace. Luca tells me he's not actually going to speak on what the title says. He's actually going to speak on something that he's been working on with us to some extent, and again, including data, I believe.
Absolutely.
Yes. Welcome to the conference. We look forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much, Nina, for inviting us. And yes, just like Nicholas and Tamara have spoken at length, data is king. We're going to be talking about data throughout the presentation. We're talking about brand recommendation data, how that links to market share data, and how this data can turn into actions and give birth to a new trend in consumer packaged good companies, which is called lean go-to-market. First of all, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Luca Pagano. I'm the CEO of BeMyEye. We provide continuous data for retail execution monitoring, leveraging technologies like crowdsourcing and image recognition. We're headquartered in London. We employ 90 people. And thanks to a crowd of approximately 1.5 million smartphone users, we collect data in-store data in 21 markets on behalf of approximately 150 clients in consumer electronics, FMCG, and pharma. How do we do it? We leverage 1.5 million smartphone users that we call eyes. These eyes use our gamified app in order to perform missions, which consist of collecting in-store data from their local supermarkets, independent retailers, or indeed pharmacies. What are these data? Anything from pictures of shelves, pictures of display, or indeed product recommendations from in-store staff. When a mission is completed by an eye, if the mission is approved by our QA team, the eye is paid and rated. So it's like a game, but in the real world, where there's real money as a payout. Now, what happens with this data that we obtain through this gamified crowdsourced field activity? The data gets then packaged into actionable insights, which are then transmitted to our clients' internal business intelligence and Salesforce automation tools, so that they can constantly monitor their in-store execution, perfect it, and use fresh in-store data to instruct their field reps on where to go and what to do. So let me give you a concrete example of how this works with one of our best clients. Samsung has been working with us for nearly 4 years now. The first time they came up to us asking for help was when they had an issue with one of their handset models catching fire in people's hands. As you remember, it was quite a big PR debacle. So they wanted to measure, they needed to measure really fast the level of reputational damage they suffered as a result. So they came up to us and they asked us to visit effectively 2,000 stores across 9 or 15 countries in Europe, actually 15 countries, to understand what in-store staff were saying and whether they were still speaking highly of Samsung. Now, the data was provided to them in full in as little as 7 days, but actually was available from day one, which means that they could actually start taking remedial action from the beginning, almost in real time. Now, the speed, the granularity, the actionability of the data was absolutely mind-blowing for them. So they've been, since then, using this methodology to monitor their retail execution, which has improved over time by 30%. This is Samsung's own words. And in case of brand recommendation, as much as 70%. Now, imagine how important brand recommendation can be in the context of consumer electronics. If you go to any consumer electronics store and you want to buy a television, chances are you will ask the in-store staff for some level of recommendation, and 9 out of 10 you probably buy the television that they will recommend to you. So if, like Samsung, you believe that there is a correlation between your in-store execution and your sales, then you can draw your own conclusions as to why these guys have been using us regularly for the past 4 years. Now, we understand that in pharma, the path to purchase doesn't follow exactly the same rules as in consumer electronics, but in the end, the fundamentals are the same. To win market share, to grow your top-line sales, you've got to get your fundamentals right, which ultimately boil down to the 3D: detailing, distribution, and display. Now, in particular today, we want to focus on detailing, i.e. brand recommendation, because in sectors where the products being sold are so sophisticated that the advice of the store staff is so important in the purchase decision, we see that brand recommendation can influence up to 70% of the purchases that are ultimately made by the consumer. And this is why increasingly consumer healthcare companies are looking at this as the silver bullet, and that's not surprising given the impact it can have on sales. Now, it's a bit like, as you see in advertising, people say that share of voice equals market share. In the world of consumer electronics, as well as in the world of pharma, share of brand recommendation has a very, very strong correlation with market share. And that's the reason why we, together with the team at Nicholas Hall, have prepared this European report on cold and flu, which obviously from Nicholas' keynote speech is a market that has suffered a little bit in the past 2 years. And we have been seeking to identify those brands across 9 countries that have the highest level of recommendation. How do we do it? Well, we simply tasked our eyes, our crowd, to go into pharmacies and engage with the pharmacist by asking recommendations for cold and flu. So they ask which product they would recommend first and what were the reasons why, and then we ask for a second level of recommendation and again the reasons why. Now, the beauty of cold and flu is that it's a very popular category, and even if you're not an expert in that particular segment, you can take part to the game that we're about to play. So I'm going to ask the audience, ideally members of the countries that we're going to unveil the most recommended product for, what do you think is the most recommended brand for cold and flu in the UK? Sorry? Lemsip. Sorry? Theraflu. Beechams. Okay. Who said Lemsip? Can you raise your hand? Where do you work? Well done to you. Very impressive. Very impressive. All right, we move on next to France. Anyone from France here? I can't hear you. Fairvex. Who said Fairvex? Excellent. What do you think is the level of brand recommendation for Fairvex in France? Above 20%. Above 20%. Fairvex has 35% brand recommendation level in France. Now let's move to Russia. Russia had a troubled year last year, but what is the most recommended cold and flu brand in Russia? There's a lady back there. Can you raise your hand that keeps on going on about Teraflu? Who is it? Can you raise your hand? Where is it? Where is she? Yeah? Okay, hands up. You got it. It is Teraflu. How much do you reckon? What is the brand recommendation share for Teraflu? 30? A bit less than that, but still is the most recommended brand. Now, Italy. I know there's some Italians here. Someone says aspirin. Anyone else? Francesco, where are you? What do you say? Which one? Tachipirina by quite some distance as well. And last but not least, Germany. Who said that? Very good. What do you reckon is it's Gripostat, by the way. 35% is the brand recommendation level. Now, first of all, the interesting thing is that there is no, much to the dismay of our Ukrainian friends, Teraflu is not the most recommended brand across Europe, but there isn't one single brand that is the most recommended one across Europe, which probably represents an opportunity for growth. However, the really fascinating insights coming from this activity, from this study, is that correlation that we've identified between the share of brand recommendation and the market share. Because in normal circumstances, like for Nurofen in the UK or Vivinci in Italy, you would expect the level of brand recommendation to be consistent with the market share level, which is what's happening in these cases. However, in some cases, you find that the level of brand recommendation for certain brands is disproportionately higher compared to their market share. So I think it is reasonable to assume that these guys will be the future category leaders. By contrast, brands like Bayer, aspirin, and crucially, Groprinosine really have to do something to address their brand recommendation level if they don't want to see their market share erode over time. Now, the good news is, this is not just data for the sake of data. This is actionable data. And whether you're poised to increase, maintain, or lose market share, the good news is that you can do something about it. How? By putting this actionable data in the hands of your sales managers. People like Anna. People like Anna can understand the trends in their territory and also somehow evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of a team, perhaps use this data to design, monitor, and implement incentive schemes. And because she has a very clear understanding of what message is being pushed to the public, she can see whether that is consistent with what the true USPs of her products are, or whether the recommendation is based on more generic reasons, which are not the ones that the brands want to push out there. But even happier are going to be Mike and Sarah. Mike and Sarah work for Anna. They're the detailing manager and the field rep manager. And now they are empowered with data, fresh data, that can help them on a daily basis whenever they take into their hands their Salesforce automation tool. They can see which pharmacies represent an absolute priority for them to go and visit because they're the most problematic ones. And because they know already what are the issues with that particular pharmacies, why they're not recommending their brand, or why they're recommending it but for the wrong reasons, they can prepare their pitch up front and be much more effective when they eventually go and visit. The most transformational companies are implementing a new methodology for their go-to-market strategies. They're overhauling their go-to-market by putting in-store fresh data at the heart of it. These are companies whose thought leaders can see where the future is going, and they're implementing the future now because they want to shape it rather than somehow having the future happen to them. This methodology, Gartner calls it lean go-to-market. Lean go-to-market, much like lean manufacturing, represents a methodology where there is a process of continuous performance improvement and progressive elimination of waste, which is made possible by the separation of roles between those who monitor and those who act. What is happening in this instance is that companies are getting access to actionable data from a very large universe of stores, and they can use this data, on the one hand, to objectively measure the performance of their field force, and on the other hand, to make sure that their field force is 100% focused on selling and taking remedial action where and when it is needed. So this means that the ROI on the field force investment is improving dramatically because the field force are no longer wasting precious time collecting data, they're no longer wasting visits, and because they have data in their hands and they're empowered with data, they can actually decide in a logical way and in a dynamic way what stores to go to and what message to deliver to those stores. So this is the new, disruptive, to quote Tamara from the earlier presentation, approach to go-to-market that most companies are taking. This is how they are trying to address issues they have with their sales fundamentals and to improve, amongst others, KPIs like brand recommendation level and, as a consequence, their market share level. That's my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, and that was as interesting as your presentations always are. It's great to hear what you've managed to build, especially with your eyes. It's really good. Can I ask if there are any questions? Better they come from you than from me, because I might ask something Luca doesn't want me to. But yeah, we have one at the back there. We'll just wait for the microphone.
Hi, Trevor Gore, X of RB. Are you able to identify who your eyes spoke to in the pharmacy? Because quite often there's more than one pharmacist and several assistants.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, your eyes, when they visit a pharmacy, do they identify who they spoke to? Because many pharmacies have 2 or 3 pharmacists, 4 or 5 assistants.
No, that's a great question. Thank you. There's obviously quite a lot of data privacy issues in doing something like that. And this is why companies that use this kind of service tend to not do it as a one-off, but use it on a continuous basis, precisely because you could have different counterparts in a given store. And ultimately, the job of these companies is to try and educate all of the players in that particular location. Thank you.
Any other questions? One from me while the audience is thinking about it. I mean, it was great to see that the brands that came out with the top recommendations. I wondered what your eyes found out about pharmacist recommendations regarding private labels and generics. Were pharmacists inclined to offer the cheaper alternative, the private label or generic, or a brand? Do you have any?
We do find occasionally a little bias. Typically when you go to pharmacies like Boots, which I don't think is, will come as a surprise to anybody. We tend to believe that when you start going on large scale of visits, the effect of bias is somehow reduced. But on average, you see that the data is quite consistent. So the products with the right properties are the ones that tend to be recommended the most.
Thank you, that's very interesting. Now, are there any other questions? I can't see any hands up, so I'm going to say thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Are you here for the rest of the time? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Now, the next session, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Katia Pantaleva, who will take you through 2 different sessions, one before coffee and then another after coffee, looking at the awards. Please pay attention because you will have to vote on who you think is best. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Katia Pantaleva and I'm Vice President at Nicholas Hall Company, and I'm the Head of Consultancy and Market Analysis Departments, and we cover geographically Asia Pacific, Europe, North America and Latin America, and our core competences include competitive intelligence, market entry, category entry, channel entry, future-proofing, strategic reviews, M&A and innovation. Our team will be around. I'll be happy to discuss how we could support you. Now, marketing awards. Every year we give awards in 3 categories, and each category has 3 entries. And as Dina has mentioned, all of you have voting forms. So as we look at the entries, please think who you would like to choose. And then, so 3 points will be for your first choice, 2 points for your second choice, and 1 point for your third choice. And first category is European New Product Launch of the Year. And I would like to invite Julia Zenzi to give our short presentation on Clearblue product, which is nominated as one of possible new product launches of the year.
Good morning, everyone. It's a real honor for me to be here to present to you the Clearblue Connected Ovulation Test System. Clearblue is the global market leader in home pregnancy and ovulation tests. And we have just launched the most advanced innovation in ovulation system, helping couples to get pregnant faster. In September, in fact, the Clearblue has just launched the first and only connected ovulation test system that is able to track 2 key fertility hormones and at the same time connect to a smartphone. Let's go through it and let's see a video with the main features. It's supposed to start, it was working this morning. Yeah, it's a film, and can anyone help from the background, please? Otherwise, I can talk to it, but it's good.
Clearblue Connected Ovulation Test System helps you maximize your chances of getting pregnant. It's an ovulation test that automatically connects via Bluetooth to your phone and syncs your results. Its advanced technology helps you get pregnant sooner by tracking 2 key fertility hormones and typically identifies 4 or more fertile days. The accuracy of a Clearblue test with the convenience of an app. Over 99% accurate at detecting your LH surge, it has smart, personalized reminders, allows you to track your results and to compare your cycle history. Clearblue Connected Ovulation Test System. Maximize your chances of getting pregnant in a way like never before.
Thank you for the support. It's supposed to be the next slide, please. Yes, technological support, thank you. So to summarize the main benefits, it's the first and only ovulation test system to be connecting to the phone and tracking 2 key fertility hormones. It's typically identify 4 or more fertile days those are the days that are actually leading and arriving to the ovulation. It means those are the days where you can maximize your chance of getting pregnant, and it's very important to read the unique days of each woman because they change cycle to cycle and, of course, from woman to woman. It's also connecting all the results on the phone. So this means that you can have a calendar where you can see exactly your fertile days. You can also compare cycle to cycles. You can also activate smart reminders. Smart reminders are helping you to understand when to test and are increasing compliance of the use of the product. Most important, this product has been proven to double the chances of getting pregnant from the first cycle of use versus not using ovulation test. So this is the great objective of the product. I could spend 1 hour talking about our in-markets results. We have a couple of minutes left. Of course, we had very successful results. It helped us to grow even more our market share. We are #1 in the UK in ovulation tests. It has been listed incrementally in Boots, among other retailers. It has been awarded by consumers because it gave 5 stars as a quality product for the quality and overall 4.8 on boots.com. We also won the Red Dot Award for the design of the product. And we had the whole campaign on the role of both partners in the couple and how we can empower not only her but also him in sharing the information. And we were able to reach with the PR campaign 143 million impressions only in the first month. But most important, we were able to help thousands of couples to get pregnant. This is Edward. He is a Clearblue baby. We often receive pictures from Clearblue babies, and in this case, the parents of Edward have been using the Clearblue Connected Ovulation Test System. We also received some letters from parents-to-be. I would just like to read part of it from you. I'm over the moon that I've fallen pregnant. There isn't a doubt in my mind that it was due to the Clearblue products, which I have confidence in. I will use them again and recommend to anyone looking for a baby. In the end, this is the reason why we go to the office. This is the reason why Clearblue is working to bring meaningful innovation in consumer lives. So thank you so much for your attention. And I'm looking forward to questions. I will be around in case of any.
So our second entry is 7C's product, and I would like to invite Payal Bangar, Senior Brand Manager, to give a short presentation on the product launch. A vitamin and mineral supplement by 7C's. Now the point of differentiation of this product is that this is the only product in the market that combines turmeric, omega-3 and glucosamine. And these three have been closely associated with joints for the consumers. We also have vitamin D, C and manganese for benefiting bones, muscles, cartilage, and connective tissues. We've got some great reviews on our key retailer websites and 4.1 stars with 554 reviews in total.
Now, the most interesting part is that this has been the most successful launch in the UK vitamins market in the last 10 years. And this chart actually shows the first 13 weeks of launch with one product, which is in the yellow line, combined with as many as 23 products in some of the brands that have been launched in the UK. Along with the fantastic product that we had a 360-degree activation around it, including TV, digital, influencers, in-store, and pharmacies. So we use the format of Medifacts to drive recommendation, which is a key driver for the category, and to educate consumers on the functional benefits of the product. With TV, we got a reach of 74%. This is the ad.
Did you know 7C's Joint Care Supplex now contains turmeric? Try new 7C's Joint Care Supplex and Turmeric. Formulated with manganese for connective tissue, vitamin C for cartilage, and vitamin D for bones and muscles. And it's the only product with turmeric extract, plus glucosamine and omega-3. The UK's #1 joint care brand, try 7C's.
We had a digital strategy of audience segmentation and retargeting, and we used artificial intelligence to serve the right creators to the audience at the right time. With that, we achieved a conversion rate of 17% versus a benchmark of 1.87% in the healthcare industry. And this was across channels like Facebook, YouTube, Google, and MyFitnessPal. We know how influencers are quite an important driver for recommendation in this category. We had a celebrity, a doctor, and a physiotherapist as our recommendation. And we used a celebrity who actually came out with her own problems of how she tackles with joint pain on an everyday basis. We were covered across key national dailies and magazine and achieved a reach of 34 million, which is half the UK population in total. Now, given UK is a self-selection environment, which consists of health and beauty stores like Boots and Superdrug, and grocers like Tesco and Sainsbury's, we had a really impactful point of sale, which was disruptive with key consistent message across all the channels. Pharmacy is again a very key channel to drive recommendation. We reached 40,000 pharmacists to educate them with our Learning e-module on Joint Care Supplex and Turmeric to drive recommendation to our consumers who visit the independent pharmacies. And with the 360-degree activation that I covered, we actually achieved a market share of 33% from 20% in just 6 months of launch, which is 13 percentage points up within 6 months. We were always the #1 joint care brand in the branded category, but now we are actually even bigger than own label. So in summary, we are the #1 joint care brand now, bigger than own label. Joint Care Supplex and Turmeric was the most successful launch in the UK VMS in the last 10 years. And when I read reviews like a grandmom able to go out with her 4-year-old grandson and play in the garden after taking a month's supply of Joint Care Supplex and Turmeric, it makes me really proud that 7C's is actually impacting and making a difference to people's life every day and helping them do the things they love every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Payal. Really great. Can use this one. Okay, so our third entry is Zovirax product, and Daniel Certain will make a presentation on the product launch.
Great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Certain Alvarez. I am working for GSK since 2016, and I was the responsible brand manager and project lead for launching Zovirax Duo in Germany. It's a pleasure to be with all of you here. What's in for you today? I would like to go through the 3 questions: what, how, and why, and let you know what's behind the wow. Let's start. What's about? Cold sores are an illness that is highly emotional. 2 insights on that. 88% of the people, according to a study, said they don't really feel confidence when they have a cold sore. And 74% of them would say or said they don't go out if they don't need to. So it's really something that is influencing the life of every single person suffering the cold sores. The market on the other side is like a boring market. There were less news in the last years, there were less innovations, no big investments, no big things. However, Sovirex Duo was the brand leader in this market. It has a strong heritage, a high brand loyalty, and it can help the cold sore progression, but it can stop the blister. We did have, indeed, in our prescription portfolio, one product called Sovirex Duo that was able to do that. Why? Because including acyclovir to hydrocortisone, we are able to prevent the blisters, so being the unique product in the market doing that. Now, the how. Knowing that we have a strong product with a strong USP, the next question was, how can we build a marketing plan that can communicate that to our 3 target groups? The consumers, the shoppers, and the HCPs. For all of them, we create some targets or some goals that we want to follow. For example, create awareness among the consumers and the HCPs. No one knew about that. And for the shoppers, just increase the point of sale visibility to draft trial. After we had that, we just developed our 360-degree Sovirex Duo campaign. One of the most important consumer assets was the TVC, which we built on the consumer insight set before. I read the voiceover, leap over look, now over later, cold sore, act on it, with the new Sovirex Duo. It stopped the virus replication and can prevent a cold sore blister. Be confident and laugh again with the new Sovirex Duo. And this is the way how it looks in German.
Abwarten oder durchstarten? Später oder jetzt? Lippenherpes, pack's an mit dem neuen Sovirex Duo. Es stoppt die Virenvermehrung und kann sogar die Bläschenbildung verhindern. Für ein selbstbewusstes Lächeln. Pack's an mit dem neuen Sovirex Duo. Zu Risiken.
On the digital activation, we knew that we have different audiences, even younger, more disruptive. That's the reason why I just tried something new, including some kind of humor in it. Our hero here, Susan, is holding an axe on her hands because she's hiding her cold sore. The reason why is, instead of doing something proactively, she just decided to do some things else, and it ends in a little bit of troubles. I read the voiceover. Oh, Susan, maybe you wouldn't be hiding that cold sore if you had used Sovirex Duo. Instead, you choose to try out that prehistoric interior design tutorial you found online. Got a little out of hand, didn't it? Don't ignore the tingle, act on it, and you can prevent a cold sore blister. And that's the way it looks in German.
Ach, Helga, mit Sovirex Duo hättest du deinen Lippenherpes vielleicht gar nicht verstecken müssen. Aber du wolltest ja lieber wie dieser Steinzeit-Einrichtungsblocker wohnen. War dann doch nicht so schick. Ja? Wenn es kribbelt, ignorier's nicht, sondern pack's an. Sovirex Duo kann die Entstehung von Lippenherpesbläschen verhindern.
For the HCPs, we also developed 3 important toolkits or assets. One of them was the print ad campaign, the second one, the advertorial campaign, and the third one was some trainings. The reason of that is we just wanted to achieve the goals that were set before. And for the shoppers, we had a very strong toolkit. If you see here, among all the tools that we have, or the assets, we have a strong eye-catching visual, which are the lips. We want to connect very quick with the shoppers at the POS. Now let's go to the wow, how I call it, the fantastic market results. I could, of course, speak longer on that, but I just focus on these 3 results and 2 insights, two internal results. The first one is, we launched Sovirex Duo in March 18. 9 months later, we were able to grow the market by almost 15%, the brand by 50%, growing 3 times faster than the market. We had a market share prior launching Sovirex Duo across about 27%. 7 weeks later, we were at 40, and having a gap of 23 percentage points to our next competitor. At the end of the year, it was 20%. Some insights numbers, we increased the net sales by almost 47%. And we delivered the business case and increased it by 18%, which was really aggressive, knowing that we have to return on invest, even though we have low budget for the brand. Last question, why? Why did we get these fantastic results? First of all, we had a great innovation, a great product, and we communicated the right way. And why? Because we listened. We listened to the consumers, to our target groups, and we knew that there are some strong insights we have to build on. We had clear goals and focus. We knew what we have to do. We don't have any money to lose. We have the courage to accept the challenge the market, the competitors, your senior boss, senior management, even the global category. If you have insights and you have strong arguments, go for it. No risk, no fun. Investing in a small brand is not that easy for the senior management. They took the risk, and we go for it. And last but not least, a great team behind it, all working together, knowing that we can add value to the company and also improve lives of consumers, which is one of the highest priorities of GSK. Thanks for your time, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you, Daniel. Okay, great. So please vote. Your votes do matter. So we had 3 products. We had Clearblue, 7Cs, and Zavirex. This is for the European New Product Launch of the Year. And again, 3 points for your first choice, 2 points for your second choice, and 1 point for your third choice. And we're going to have coffee break now. And when we come back, we're going to look at 3 more awards categories. And we shall be back at 11:40. Enjoy coffee and networking. Okay, great, and welcome back from the break. So we're going to have a look at 2 more awards categories. So our next category is Worldwide Marketing Award, and we give this award for the most innovative marketing campaign. And our first entry will be presented by Jason Carroll from Innova, and that will be about DFLAM. So Jason, the stage is yours.
Now, I don't know if anyone knows anyone from the Philippines. That's where I'm from. I'm with Innova. Anyone heard of Innova Pharmaceuticals? Okay, not many, but that's okay, because I say you don't trust big companies, so you should trust me a lot, because we're the 50th largest company in the Philippines. Okay, so don't forget that. Anyone that's been to the Philippines knows that the Filipinos are the most wonderful people. And I have 66 of them. I'm the managing director of Innova, so I'm very lucky to have these people, but 66 people, and I've had texts from 63 of them already today. Have you won? Have you won yet? And it's like they're 6 hours in front. So, have you won? It's like, no, not yet. And then I'm waiting on 2 others, but one's in labour. And they're saying, well, she'll send something later on if you win. And it's like, hang on. Let's talk about DFLAM. DFLAM is for sore throats. Now, those of you that would know products like Strepsils, okay, spontaneous awareness, 100%. Bactidol, J&J, 95%. Camillosand, Menarini, 85%. Doctors, no DFLAM. It's been around for 10 years. Consumers, 0%. 0. That's 0.35, according to the research. So I couldn't think of anything else to rhyme with 0 apart from hero. So we'll talk a bit about the Philippines and why it's such an important market for us. Advertising is everywhere. Billboards, TV, cable, online, Facebook. Everyone in the Philippines has 3 Facebook accounts. One is their real one is the fake one, and one is a stalking one. That's what I've heard. They all have 3. Everyone has 3 accounts, so I don't know why. I love Facebook. But advertising is everywhere. So when you're up against a market where the competitors are so large, about 8% market share, all from doctors. Never ever before talked to consumers. Never before. So the pressure on a company that's 50th in size against one that's 4th, 5th, and 15th, there are 3 competitors against us, not the easiest thing to convince your boss about. But we did try that, and we managed to get some support. The good thing about the Filipino people is that when they hear about something, 96% of them know what they want when they walk into a pharmacy. There is no stopping them. No stopping them. If they think DFLAM, they'll buy DFLAM. If they think Strepsils, they'll buy Strepsils. So how do you get them to remember? There are only 3 things really the Filipinos love the most. Sports, basketball especially, yeah. Celebrities, love celebrities, and beauty pageants. Sorry, but can't help it. You can't stay away from them. They're everywhere in the Philippines. So knowing that 96% of consumers know what they want, and we had 0% awareness.
A highly competitive, crowded category, dominated by established brands with great resources. What are the chances for a virtually unknown? For 10 years, DFLAM was promoted exclusively to HCPs. It's most recommended by doctors, but suffered lackluster growth. A weak pharmacy alliance kept the products totally invisible to consumers. Yet in the Philippines, the majority of consumers know what to buy prior to stepping inside a pharmacy. Accelerating brand growth will have big challenges every step of the way. Innovating how it reaches out will be paramount. With a big idea, DFLAM marches on, strong. With brand awareness as the key success driver, a local celebrity was crucial.
Miss Universe 2015 is Philippines.
Pia Alonso Wurzbach enjoys 98% likability among Filipinos. But beyond her beauty and popularity, Pia fits the brand core values to a T. Hard-working, trustworthy, best in class, the best at what it does.
You know, the Flam spray for sore throats is actually a lot like me. It works hard to achieve targeted results. It's the best it can be at what it does. And it values the support of people you trust, like your doctor.
Difflam Forte Throat Spray has a clinically proven ingredient. It targets the site of sore throat pain for relief from 60 seconds.
So if you're like me, for a painful sore throat, you can trust Difflam to work hard for you. I've always had this mantra that if you don't succeed the first time, you just have to keep on trying. I trust Difflam. I trust Difflam. Difflam is for me and you.
With 7.9 million followers, Difflam received added recognition. On the storefront, the country's leading pharmacy chain threw its full support to the brand, stocking up products, providing excellent display spaces. No longer invisible, Difflam is now within easy reach of the consumers. The results speak for themselves. Impact to sales was tremendous, a complete halo effect across the portfolio, all within the first 11 weeks. By innovating its approach and forging strong partnerships, Difflam is finally living up to its full potential, the best it can possibly be.
I know my time is up. I realize that. Difflam grew 100% in terms of its overall product, and the halo effect that was discussed went across every single one of the SKUs, even though we only advertised one of them. This year we're up 150% over last year. So the product is growing very, very strongly, and a lot of that is due to Pia, half German, half Filipino. Okay. So thank you very much. Please vote for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason. Really great results from zero to hero. Okay, great. So our second entry in the Worldwide Marketing Award is Frenadol Restage by Johnson & Johnson, and we have a video for this entry.
Hello, good night everyone. Greetings from Madrid. We are the Frenadol team. Hope you are having a fantastic time in Vienna. We are very sorry that we could not make this appointment with you tonight, but well, we have a very good representation with Grigoris, and today we are very, very excited to share with you a great case study of the Frenadol Restage.
So it's a case about the Frenadol Restage that happened last winter, and we made the brand much more relevant for the consumers of today, following a 360 approach. We reinforced the brand love and reinforced also our leadership position in Spain.
So please enjoy our video, enjoy this evening, and please vote for us.
Frenadol, once a prescription cold and flu drug, now an iconic leading love brand. The secret of its success? Constant innovation and focus on consumers, such as the recent Restage that created an ecosystem of extraordinary brand interactions on multiple touchpoints. Check out the Frenadol Total Brand Experience. This winter, Frenadol made its appearance with a totally refreshed look through a new modernized packaging design. On TV, a new equity campaign broke gender stereotypes and reinforced Frenadol's superiority.
Necesito un disfraz para hoy.
Este es Pablo y hoy tiene un resfriado espantoso. Pero nada, y mucho menos un resfriado, le impedirá crear el disfraz más original para su hija. Porque Pablo no pierde el día por un resfriado gracias a la solución más completa de Frenadol. Resfriado, venga ya.
This was complemented by short TV tags and digital videos emphasizing the benefits and winning claims of each Frenadol product. In the digital space, with premium displays and flexible buying according to pathology, Frenadol reached millions of screens in Spain at the right time, in the right place, with the right message, and on social media. Real people proved that losing your days to a cold is not an option thanks to Frenadol.
Soy María y tengo un resfriado. Pero mira esto.
On the web, with new content creation, a new link building strategy, and branded articles on premium websites and health blogs, the site's organic traffic skyrocketed. At the end of the funnel, in the pharmacies, single-minded messages and impactful materials maximized Frenadol's visibility and made Frenadol a symbol of Christmas spirit. And back to our roots, an internal campaign in Madrid made every employee a Frenadol ambassador.
Outstanding results. 1.2 points of share gain, 25% of sales growth. More importantly, we help more than 7 million people to relieve their cold.
Frenadol is a rock star. It's our #1 growth contributor to global cough and cold, and this thanks to execution with passion and excellence.
Frenadol, a winning brand experience.
Okay, great. And our third entry is Netflix by Sanofi from Brazil, and we also have video for this entry. Right. So please vote. So the category is Worldwide Marketing Award for the most innovative marketing campaign, and we had 3 entries: Deflam by Innova, presented by Jason; Frenadol Restage by Johnson & Johnson Spain; and Doroflex by Sanofi Brazil. So again, 3 points for your first choice, 2 points for your second choice, and 1 point for your last third choice. Okay, great. So our third category is European Borg Creative Award, and we give this award to the most outstanding example of creativity, which is placed in any media channel. And our first entry, and it will also be a video, is Theraflu Flu Tracker from GSK from my home country, Russia.
Have you already heard about Theraflu Flu Tracker project? That is definitely something that's worth seeing and learning more about. The unprecedented project you've never encountered before. This case has already won tens of awards across Russia, Europe and the globe. And no wonder the best is yet to come. But let's start from the beginning. Just imagine, wouldn't it be great to learn about the high risk of catching a cold in advance? But such forecast has never existed till now. TheraFlu, as a leader in cold and flu category, accepted the challenge and created the first and unique service that provides trustworthy data on cold and flu incidence rates in each region of Russia and shows the forecast for 10 days ahead. While creating the service, we faced several obstacles. First, Russia is huge and diverse. 85 regions in 5 climate zones where cold and flu incidence responds differently to weather changes. For example, in Moscow, people get sick when humidity rises. Meanwhile, in St. Petersburg, that doesn't matter at all. But the wind from the sea correlates directly with the number of cold and flu sufferers. Second, the only source of official cold and flu data is the Flu Institute. It provides data with significant delay, and only for flu, no cold incidents, not counting those flu sufferers who didn't physically visit a doctor. But no obstacle stops TheraFlu in the pursuit of greater goal, to create a reliable cold and flu forecast. We've built mathematical models based on big data analysis and developed artificial intelligence that processes it in real time. The Flu Tracker algorithm takes into account search data, changes in the number of people searching information about cold and flu, mentions in social networks and forums, weather conditions, temperature trends, humidity and precipitations. To have the maximum accuracy, Flu Tracker is constantly cross-checking its data against the actual demand for cold and flu medication in pharmacies and with Flu Institute reports. The number of measurements collected and processed by artificial intelligence every day equals to 50 million. Its continuous learning improves the information quality, which has already made it possible to bring the forecast accuracy up to 95%. It might sound complex, but it's easy to use. The Flu Tracker shows a number on the scale from 1 to 10. It's projected on the map with simple color coding. Geolocation suggests your region, and the simple switcher allows to see the situation in the whole country. For the convenience of new users, we have introduced a training mode that guides the user through the main service options with the aid of simple tips. We have as well developed a personal account option with simplified registration through social networks. Authorization allows you to save your favorite regions and receive the current forecast by email. You can also subscribe to notifications through the browser. Our chatbot assists with the site navigation, consults on the medicine that might be relevant during cold and flu epidemic, directs users to the closest pharmacy, gives the weather forecast, and even suggests ideas for leisure time. Flu Tracker is the largest digital project by TheraFlu, truly unique on Russian pharmaceutical market. It follows our users throughout the day, at home with the weather forecast on TV, in social networks, in the subway on their way to work, in the office while checking mail, when planning a trip, in the city, on billboards, in airports and railway stations. We have used all the most relevant channels that ensure wide coverage to let people know about the threat of catching a cold in advance. To inform health specialists about the new Flu Tracker, we announced it at the biggest professional event of the year, the Physicians National Congress. Flu Tracker enabled us to make our media investments more effective. We were in the right place at the right time, starting the advertising campaigns only in those cities that were experiencing the peak of flu season. This helped us significantly reduce the media campaign costs and had huge practical value for users of Flu Tracker. In addition, we have developed business accounts for GSK employees. This tool helps them analyze data, plan and prepare negotiations with partners. It allows users to get a 4-week forecast for all districts and regions to accurately forecast purchasing. Now medical representatives always have new information to share with the pharmacist. It's a great example of win-win success story for all the parties, including consumers, retailers, experts, and GSK business in achieving their goals. And we did it. The results of this project are beyond all the expectations. More than 1 million users spend on average more than 8 minutes on the Flu Tracker site. When was the last time you spent this much time on a single website? Bounce rate only 20%, and 11.6% of users return again and again. That's what unique and useful consumer content means. TheraFlu has very ambitious plans to grow every year 2 times faster than the market. Along with other marketing support tools, the Flu Tracker project has become the pearl that allows the brand to reach new sales records and grow progressively year after year. During the lifetime of the project, our volume and value share has increased by almost 2.5 points. That allowed TheraFlu brand to strengthen its indisputable leadership position. The return on investment rate stood at the incredible height of 4.5. Flu Tracker significantly strengthened brand health credibility and involvement rate. Top brand performance plus 6 percentage points. Brand purchase plus 4 percentage points. Most used brand plus 5 percentage points. Flu Tracker became the driver for GSK innovation research and development. Another data data-driven project, Allergy Tracker by Flexinase, was launched subsequently. It has already resulted in significant business improvement indicators. However, that is not where the story ends. The project resulted in immense international interest and subsequently is about to be launched in Romania, with further rollout to more countries all over the world. Now all Theraflu consumers, doctors, pharmacists, partners and GSK as well, not only in Russia, can use Theraflu flu tracker data and be ready for the cold and flu season.
Really great. Now I would like to invite Mark Berkut to present Accelor 2-in-1 as a second entry for the Creative Award.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Mark Berkhout, presenting to you in person, and I'll be talking a little bit slower. I represent EMEA Consumer Health, a small Dutch company which is part of the EMEA Cooper Health Group. And I'm very excited that we were nominated for the Colin Borg Award. Now, Colin Borg is about creativity, so obviously I'll show you some film that we're very proud of. But just to give you a little bit of context before we go there. I want to talk about the product, a little bit about the strategy, and some preliminary results. So we entered the campaign for the launch of our Accelor 2-in-1 warts treatment product. It was launched in Italy in April-May last year. In the meantime, we rolled it out in 6 other countries, and 5 are along the way. It's truly a breakthrough product. So it combines cryo, freezing technology, with acid treatment. And effectively what it does is it treats a wart of verruca from the inside out and from the outside in at the same time. And so what you get is much faster treatment time and much higher cure rates. So really an addition to the category and a co-development between EMEA and medical brands. So let's talk a little bit about the strategy. We developed a 360-degree campaign combining online and offline. And focusing on 2 distinct target groups. The first one is the aware sufferers, so with a treatment intent. And so we reached out to this target group through the classical TV, Google Display Network, and search, driving people directly to our stores and through our websites. But much more interestingly, and we call that the big hidden potential, is a second target group of unaware sufferers. Now, typically, we're talking about moms with kids in the age group between, let's say, 4 and 11, which, by the way, is the peak prevalence for warts and verrucas. And research has told us that 60% of these moms effectively do not know that their kids suffer from warts and verrucas. So as part of the campaign, we came up with a video advertising campaign called #CheckYourKidsFeet, which is a campaign that drives the pathology awareness message alongside with brand messages towards this target group through an online video that we will be seeing as entry for this award, with various pre-rolls posted on mom platforms and YouTube and Facebook. So again, a pretty straightforward media plan, starting with one TV burst, 800 GRP. The plan was to do a second burst in September, but as often happens, it was cancelled for budgetary reasons in the country. This is Italy, by the way. And we extended the campaign with the online and digital elements throughout the year. Some preliminary results of the campaign, and keeping in mind this is a very big category where 80% of the volume is in fact the very low-priced traditional salicylic acids in the market. During our TV airing, we reached #1 position market share in the premium segment, #3 position overall in the market. But more interestingly for us is during our digital campaign, we reached 50 times the baseline in terms of unique visitors to our website, with a net conversion to our where to buy and selling pages of almost 15%. So now moving to the creativity, I'm going to show the Italian TV ad, 15 seconds. It's in Italian, but I think the message is pretty straightforward, just as a baseline for what we're trying to say about this product. And afterwards, we'll be looking at the online video, which has exactly the same message, but in a storytelling, animatic way, to open up our non-aware target group for the pathology and the brand messages.
Verruche, agisci subito. Nuovo Exilor Works trattamento 2 in 1. Combina la crioterapia, che agisce dall'interno all'esterno, con l'acidoterapia, che agisce dall'esterno all'interno, per trattare la verruca in 5 giorni. Exilor Works trattamento 2 in 1.
So then now we move to the online video. It's a minute and a half, so I will move to my chair. But just like to say that thank you, and thank you for voting for us. Thank you.
Mommy!
What's wrong, sweetie?
Mom, there's a monster in my room. There?
No, there's nothing here, sweetie.
And here?
Nothing here either.
And there?
No, there's nothing here. You see, there's no monsters in your room.
Look under the blanket. Ooh.
Oh my gosh.